Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the FSC's Get in Shape webinar series. Hopefully, welcome back. If this is your first webinar, the past webinars are available from the FSC's Get in Shape website. That's getinshape.nz, and on the FSC YouTube channel. So please go back and watch some of the earlier webinars because you'll find some valuable information to help you prepare for the new regime. The purpose of this series is to help you prepare for the new regime that comes in on the 15th of March 2021. My name is Mark Bonicevic. I'm from Partners Life and I chair the FSC's Financial Advisor Transition Working Group. I'm just going to make names up as I go along today, I think. It is my pleasure today to welcome back three of our stellar experts in the industry. We've got Kati Main from Rosewell Consulting, Steve Burgess from Compliance Refinery, and David Greenslade from Strategic Group. None of these people will be any stranger to you, and if you've been watching the series, you'll have seen these people a number of times before. So I won't go into too much detail about their extensive amount of experience in this area. I'll let them just let their knowledge speak for itself as they take us through the webinar. What we've covered so far is a range of topics, right from structuring your business for financial advice through to the obligations that you have in the current regime, the duties that will be in place on the 15th of March 2021, and the previous webinar was around technology. So we had things about using technology to make your business more effective, address changes for customer expectations, and very much about the process of how to identify and find and what to look for when you're finding new technology to use in the business. And there was a really great resource that Strategy offered to us that's on the Get in Shape website, a link to the document that has a good checklist that you can use for doing due diligence when you're looking for new technology. So this sort of stuff is very, very valuable, and the webinar is available for you to watch again on the Professional Advice Hub at getinshape.nz. Today's webinar is about a really important topic for all businesses all businesses generally, and it's around governance. And we have a tendency in the financial advice industry to operate kind of a practice scenario where a lot of advisors run their day-to-day operating, getting clients, seeing new clients, getting leads for the next client, and not thinking so much more broadly about the business. And governance is about how you oversee your business. And a strongly governed business, whether it's for one advisor or 100 advisors, the principles are the same. It's just the scale of how you apply it that differs. So this is a really important session around how you as a business owner should govern, look after your business and make sure that you're heading the right direction, how you make sure you're on top of all of your obligations. And of course, as a company, there are a lot of director obligations in the Companies Act. So I'm going to hand over now to Kati to introduce what we're going to cover in this topic. And Kati, Steve, and David will take it from here. I'll be monitoring questions throughout the webinar. So if you've got any questions that you want to ask, please pop them either into the chat or into Q&A, and I'll pop them through to the team so that they can answer those as they go. Thank you, Kati.
Magic. Hey, thanks, Mark, and good morning, everyone. So what we've got lined up for you today on our agenda, so we're going to talk a little bit about some of the obligations that you've already got under the Companies Act, what governance is really, a bit of the basics about that, what's required of a director of a financial advice provider, and starting to get you to widen your thinking what the new regulatory regime might bring on that. We're very cognizant of some of the challenges for very small FAPs, so we're going to spend a bit of time talking about that. Hopefully you'll come away with some good ideas about what not to do, as well as some practical ideas about what you could do. But we're also going to front up to some of the questions that you might have in terms of, well, what's the FMA likely to be expecting when we submit our full licence application? So we'll touch on that as well. So first up, what is governance? So look, there's a fantastic website that the government have put out, business governance, business.gov.nz, and it's got a great section about governance in it. And I thought they couldn't have put it any better. So they talk about governance is about the time that you dedicate to working on your business rather than working in it. So it includes all the checks and balances that you put in place to make sure that your business runs smoothly, that your business is meeting its objectives, and really that it stays out of trouble. So it also means about getting expert advice on matters that you don't yet know enough about, and some support when you're making big decisions. So when it comes to licensing, the FMA guidance for the licensing may well talk about something such as an oversight body. So you want to think about governance as being oversight or supervision, or making sure that the wheels don't come off of your business. So that's when they're talking about the oversight body. And really it's the fundamental reason why you would hold the license, because you actually want to take on board that commitment and responsibility for oversight of the business and the advice that happens under it. To do that, you'll need to create a bit of a structure, a bit of a process about how often that you'll look at things in the business and what you'll look at. And that's what we call the governance framework. And there's simple components on that. It's things like maybe having a simple terms of reference. What are we going to look at? How often are we going to look at them? And what are we going to report on or have a closer look at time to time? The other thing that we wanted to touch on was the fact that your company will have a constitution. Now, if it's not one that you created specifically for your company, it may well be quite a generic one that sort of covers most companies. So you want to actually have a look at that too as you set up your governance framework, because that would set out the basic expectations of governance for your company. And you just want to make sure that you refer to that and stay consistent with what's in your constitution. So look, if you think that you might struggle to find time to focus on governance, don't worry, you're not alone. We'll touch on that today. But most business owners have multiple demands on their times and find it tricky to balance all their roles. But what we want you to think about coming out of today's session is, don't think about governance as just being paperwork and more hassle. Think about, am I running my business in the best possible way, and getting help sometimes to ensure that you do succeed. And it's probably an extension of what you're already doing. So don't think of it as something new that we're starting from fresh. So David, do you want to add any comments to that?
Other than there's already a whole swag of liabilities and responsibilities that directors of current financial advisory businesses have. So if we look at the next slide there, Naomi, you will see there that everyone, if you've got a limited liability company, you already have liabilities and obligations under the Companies Act. And there's four key ones that are sitting there. And that is all around making sure you've got appropriate policies, processes in place, and that you're making decisions that are based on reasonable fact and good information, so that you can move the company forward and meet the stakeholder and shareholder obligations. You also obviously have the responsibility of filing statutory documents, annual returns, all of that sort of stuff, and you just have a few more of those once you move into FAPland. You'll notice that the standard conditions, the two standard conditions for a transitional FAP license, talk about record keeping. Well, under the Companies Act, you have an inherent liability and responsibility for maintaining and keeping records. Now, under the Companies Act, those records relate to the company itself and keeping it correct on the company's register, but also it will then extend out to any license and legal obligations you have. And then linked into all of this is the company itself will make decisions and will enter into various contracts with suppliers, be they compliance providers, lawyers, accountants, custodians, and so on and so forth. And you as a director are responsible and liable for those. And the extent of some of these contracts will become quickly evident if you haven't already seen the new contracts coming through from some of the lenders and from some of the insurers. Some of the obligations they're putting on to you as a director are quite significant, and there's expectations that you have the systems, processes, and controls to be able to fulfill those obligations. So that's the Companies Act, but then on top of that, both in today's regime and also into the future, we have things like the Fair Trading Act, Consumer Guarantees Act, there's the Privacy Act, there's the Health, Safety and Work Act, and so on and so forth. And at the moment, you're covered under the Financial Advisors Act, but in the new regime, from the 15th of March onwards, you'll come under the Financial Markets Conduct Act. So already you have a whole swag of obligations. So Steve, anything you want to sort of mention and build on that?
Yes, thanks, David. That's a great overview of what businesses are having to deal with. And as you were talking about that, I was thinking about the significant difference that a lot of people who are financial advisors are going to experience as they move into being directors, and what the responsibilities are as directors, which is quite significantly different from a lot of advisors' previous life with being an AFA and being individually regulated by the FMA. If we want to switch to the next slide, Naomi. Director responsibilities are going to be a significant change for a lot of businesses. What directors of businesses are going to have to do is ensure businesses meet are compliant with legislation, regulation, the code, good conduct, FAP standard conditions, and contract obligations. These are quite significant bars that you're going to have to do to maintain your FAP license, which is going to be a very different process from what you've experienced in the past. You're going to have to maintain fit and proper status, oversee financial advice provided to clients, and there will be potential penalties. So I imagine a lot of you are thinking, well, that's a bit daunting. How do we approach that? One of the biggest things we see is that directors don't necessarily understand that their obligations are changing, and that's why this is a really important session for would-be directors or even businesses that are in the decision-making process. Because I think all three of us would agree that it's quite a significant standard to meet, and that there are some serious ramifications if you get it wrong. So it's okay to look at it and say, this is probably something that maybe I'm not as comfortable with, or maybe I am. Too often we still talk to businesses and we say, can you show us your policies and procedures and what you're going to do in the future? And they send an advice process, which is not going to be adequate or close to adequate moving forward. So, and that's the big difference here. As a director, you're going to have an active regulator with the FMA, as opposed to the environment you've previously been in, which was very passive. The ultimate responsibility is going to sit with you as the director of the business. And some of the things you can do in that space, you need to make sure that you understand what your policies and procedures are and create policies and procedures to meet the legislation, the standard conditions, and the things we've gone over previously. And those have to be not only bottom down, so you have to make sure you meet those, but a lot of businesses are going to have to really focus and say, what are the skill sets in my business? What time, what amount of time do we have to actually meet these? And do we have the right skill sets sitting in the business? So you've got to customize those for your business, and that always doesn't work for a lot of small businesses. A lot of small businesses, people are wearing a lot of hats, and this is going to be the first time most of you have an active regulator looking at you, and you're going to have the ultimate responsibility. So when you're setting those up, you need to be asking yourself, who's going to do it? When are they going to do it? How's it going to be reported? And you need to really do a serious assessment of whether or not they have the skill set to do it. And those policies and procedures, as a director, those need to be living. They can't sit in a folder somewhere that's never accessed anymore, or in a drawer. Those need to be living. You and probably your support people, those are going to have to be documents that you're accessing kind of on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, certainly. If you're not doing it right now, I would strongly suggest you get started. You can start to do, you can use this period moving up to the 15th of March to decide what you're good at and what you need help with. It is understandable that you will need additional resources, potentially, and additional capability as you move forward into the new regime. And starting now allows you to understand exactly what you're going to have to do and whether or not you need the skill set. At the end of the day, as a director, you're going to have ultimate responsibility. And that's not just with the FMA, that's potentially with product providers, which is something David touched on, but is going to be very significant moving forward. Any thoughts in that space, Cardi?
Yeah, look, I just want to perhaps reiterate what you said right at the start there, Steve, in terms of, there's a lot of responsibility on the director's shoulder now. So you really want to think carefully about who are the directors of your business, particularly if you've got a friend or a spouse or a partner that's a co-director and may not be across the new responsibilities or not want them. You'll see there on the slide, we've added a bit of a triangle there to show that some of the different potential penalties. The good news is we've got a very positive regulator that tries to work very much with industry and educate first. And so they've got these tools that they can use, such as action plans and stop orders and direction notices, before they're going to bring in the heavy guns, with more infringement notices or start to get into that sort of court area. So if you're a willing complier and you've got good systems and processes in your business and demonstrating why you're trying to do the right thing, then I think that can take a little bit of the fear factor away from that whole worry about director liability. So let's move on now to some of the challenges for the small financial advice providers. So you might well be asking yourself some of these questions and go, really? Does this really apply to me? I'm a one-man band. For goodness sake, are we going overboard here? But actually, governance should be part of any business. It doesn't matter how small you are. And you start with the basics and you make it more structured when you grow, when you add more people to your business. So you can do it with yourself, or you can do it with other business owners or other advisors. They can help you. We're going to touch on that shortly. But you take more of a structured approach once there's more at stake, once you've got more clients, investors, products that you advise on, things like that. But the actual process is pretty much the same whether you're big or small. You just have checks and balances in place and access to expert advice and support. You can keep your approach to governance pretty low key if you are very small. And really there's sort of two key sort of approaches to governance really if you are a small business. You can have a bit of a do-it-yourself approach, and that looks like governance being down to you with support from other business owners or other external advisors. You can do regular do-it-yourself reviews of your business performance and its direction. You make all the decisions that drive the business. You've got complete control over everything, but you also shoulder all the responsibility. And then you can bring in expert advice as you need it. But the trouble with this full do-it-yourself approach is who's going to hold you to account and who's going to ask the questions and challenge your thinking. So that's where it's really helpful to bring somebody else in from time to time to ask those questions of you. For the larger organisation or as you grow, then you actually start to get more structured. You start to have more regular sessions to look at this. You start to share the control with other directors. And you start to have those directors start to make those big decisions on your behalf. So I guess the key thing for the small financial advice providers, look really carefully at what the expectations are when the full licensing guide comes out, and then make sure that you're on top of those requirements and you can build a simple process to meet that. So, Steve, do you want to talk a little bit more about small compliance assurance and so on there? I think we're moving on to the next slide now, sorry. Yeah, yep. Sorry. Yeah, what not to do?
Yep. So I would say in that there's lots of solutions for different businesses in that space. And like Cardi was saying, you can meet those standards and be creative as you go through those standards. What isn't a good idea to do is ignore the issue. The problem will go away. That will not be sufficient as we move forward. You're not going to be able to ignore issues. The problem is definitely not going to go away. As I said earlier, you'll have an active regulator. This will come up at some point in time. appointing a spouse to the board to make up numbers is never a good idea. You shouldn't have somebody on your board that doesn't have a specific skill set. It is a good idea if they do have a specific skill set that meets those needs. And we would really encourage people to find other people that actually fit in that space, but having a spouse just adds to stress and risk to the family. Appoint people who don't meet the fit and proper test. You need to really make sure that as you're going through, and you can use different skills like accreditations you can get, and even within the industry and outside the industry. Sorry, my internet connection is apparently unstable. Hopefully you can hear me okay. And you want to make sure that people have operated at a certain level, have a certain level of competency, and meet the fit and proper standards. You don't want to be bringing dubious people into your business to help you oversee your business. From a reputational standpoint, that could hurt, and from an operational standpoint, that could take you in a direction you don't necessarily want to go. Don't build in documents and structure you don't intend to follow. One of the biggest things we see is businesses that get aspirational, that say, this is who I want to be. And as humans, we often do the same thing. I think we all, the stats out there about how people wildly overrate their driving capability. But as people, we tend to say, this is where we want to be, and not necessarily look at this is where we are. We would really encourage you at the start of this regime to hit the minimum standard, show that you can hit that minimum standard, and then if you want to get aspirational, start to move along in that space. But this is a new task for a lot of not only directors, but also people supporting directors in businesses. So make sure you build structure and documents that you will be able to implement, and you will be able to do those things consistently over time. If you are building a board, have it diverse. Build a board with people that are different from you. Build a board with people that are going to challenge you. And that's one of the biggest things. You don't just, if you're using an advisory board, you don't want to find somebody that just agrees with you all the time and doesn't actually challenge you. You need people with certain skill sets, have a purpose, understand exactly why you're doing it, what you want out of it, what the scope of it is. Use some of the tools that we've talked about already to put that in place so you know exactly what you're doing in those meetings, and that it's formalized, so you're taking minutes, actions, notes, you have papers, you have an agenda, and you can show that to the FMA to show how you govern your business, and keep it simple. Just keep it simple. I think we all know that as we've moved through these different regimes, the more complex your business will cause you more time, which increases the skill set you need for both yourself and the other people who are helping you govern your business. And you also need to think it's not just the regulatory landscape. So your structure, although it may be allowed in a regulatory sense, you've still got product providers. You've still got to oversee that structure. Don't make it too complicated. The more complicated you make it, the more likely it is to fall over. And that's going to cause you issues. Do you have any thoughts on that, David?
Yeah, so thanks for that, Steve. So my sort of key takeout from that is everything needs to be proportional to your business and where you want to go. So if we just look at the next slide, so we've looked at what not to do, but now let's look at some of the practical things that we could potentially do. So if we look at my own business, Strategy Group, for the first 20 years, we got by with sort of a dozen odd staff and me as the sole director. So I was basically having meetings with myself, which wasn't that sort of ideal. But I was fortunate in that we were sort of licensed with NZQA. So they would come and do periodic audits and they would challenge me on what we did. Also, we went through the ISO process around standards, And that is an incredibly rigorous process for compliance and auditing and things like that. And as a result, there was a lot of external input that came from experts around structures and processes. So although I was the sole director for the first 20 years, I was getting high quality input and challenging on a regular basis from the organisations that I was paying to come and audit us. As we then evolved and started to grow, I put in place an advisory board that included 2 independent directors with lots of experience. And then in the last 12 months, that has transitioned across to a full-blown board where there's now 3 directors, myself and 2 others. And although I'm the 100% owner of the company and the sole executive director, I'm not the chairman. So I have an independent chairman who's one of the 2 independent directors. So what we've done in Strategy is evolved our governance as the business has grown and as we've sort of expanded. So some of the practical things all of us can consider doing is upskilling ourselves. That is absolutely critical. The fewer people you have in a board, the more important it is for you as the sole director to be able to show that you've got the competence, knowledge and skill to be a director, not just in pure company act obligations, but a director of a licensed FMCA entity. So the sorts of places you can look at there is obviously the Institute of Directors. They have some great courses, as does Governance New Zealand. They're high quality courses, quite expensive, very extensive as well, but they are fantastic, particularly at the bigger end of town. Most of their courses are orientated primarily where you have sort of a multi-person board in place. There's also a whole swag of CPD out there and lots of good papers, and Kati sort of mentioned the business.gov. Also, what we're doing at Strategy Group is we're putting together a micro-credential, so there will actually be a governance course, a 2-day governance course for owners of small FAPs. And that is designed specifically to help you as a director meet your governance obligations. Advisory boards are fantastic, but you've got to make sure that they maintain their role as an advisory board so that they don't become a deemed director. So you bounce things around, you get some input from them, but they're not making those key decisions. A very practical way of doing things is to have a business advisor, be it your lawyer, your accountant. Often it's your accountant that can sort of act as a pseudo director to give you advice and to challenge you on a number of things. Or you may actually use your compliance provider to be able to help you in that particular area. In my particular case, I chair a number of financial advisory business boards. I'm not on their board as a director, so I'm not taking the liability, but my role is to ensure that they have documented some basic meeting papers and notes, and to actually formally chair the business, and then to make sure that minutes are prepared. So as Kati and Steve has said, I provide that external input into it. That's just one of a multitude of ways of doing it. Whereas in other instances, various people within our business, they then provide other advice, or in the case of some of our clients, what they do is they deliberately extend in formal terms our compliance engagement so that we then specifically challenge them and ask questions around their governance. So between us as the compliance provider and them as the business owner, we work out what are these additional governance things they would like us to check on, and then as part of our annual review, we check on those and we report through to them around that. Also keep in the back of your mind that if you've got a business that then has authorised bodies, we refer to that as an AB in this slide, then you've got to make sure that they also have governance structures in place. And if you're a larger FAP, then one of your key roles that you may want to consider is providing some form of external input into the governance of those small authorised bodies that you have. But whatever you do, make sure you document your processes and your operations manual so that it correctly describes how you're going to provide that oversight to the business. So, Kati, any thoughts, comments?
Yeah, look, I'd like to really reiterate those first comments you made, David, about the upskilling yourself. You know, when we used to assess license applications, we used to look at governance as a skill set in its own right, and you would expect the applicant to have done some governance training. Just because you're really good at giving financial advice doesn't necessarily mean that you know those key skills that you need as a director. So I think it's important to do that upskilling. And also ongoing professional development and what that looks like, and whether you're a member of a professional body. I think all those are really strong ticks in the right direction for getting your full licence. And that point that you made about if you're an authorised body, you know, I think it could be easy to forget that you're still likely to have governance obligations as an authorised body FAT, that you can't just totally rely on the licensee to take care of everything for you. All right, so Naomi, shall we move on to some of the things that you could do, which sort of lead on from that? And I guess the first thing is, hey, getting the right people around you is so critical, as David was saying. You know, sometimes it can be a bit of an old boys network and people get shoulder tapped, but actually in this day and age, you should really be going through a recruitment process and mapping out, well, what are the skills and the attributes that would challenge what I've got, what I bring to the table already, but also add a lot of value to this business. And they could be in a whole lot of areas. So recruit for the right challenge and skill set, not for somebody that you think that you'll get on with, because otherwise it's just about, you know, commonality of thought, and that's not what you're looking for. You're looking for somebody to challenge you. Of course, it's got to be proportional to your business size. You don't need to bring in whole big boards and committees if you're a very small business. And as Steve said before, you know, diversity of skills is important. People think differently, they bring different knowledge and expertise and skill sets to the table. And that diversity, I think, is really important when you consider what type of clients or investors do you have in your own client base. And are we really understanding their needs properly? So I think that brings in that conduct lens as well. You could look at extending the remit of your current providers, as David mentioned before. You know, particularly I think accountants are really good because they're often now trained as business advisors as well. And when you meet with them to go through your financial statements, you can actually have that robust financial discussion, not just about how did you perform last year, but where are you seeing the opportunities next year? How much risk are you prepared to take? How are you mitigating that risk? You know, what type of expenses such as governance, compliance, licensing should we be provisioning going forward? So I think that financial discussion is a really important element of your governance. And also understanding some of the resources involved. Who does what and when and what skills are required. And just mapping that out in a simple terms of reference. It could be as simple as a one page to say, this is how often I'll have my governance session. It might be quarterly, 6 monthly. Yearly may not be enough with the amount of things you'll have on your plate. So, you know, adapting to being licensed and making sure that you've got the right skill sets around the table. All right, shall we move on to the next one? I think we've covered that quite well. So what about as the business grows, David? So you mentioned before some of your experiences with your business.
Yeah, so the trigger point for us around appointing a board, this is within Strategy Group, is when the business is small, I can look at absolutely everything in the business. I know all of the staff, I know exactly what they're all doing, and I know all of the clients and everything else. But then as the business grows, you tend to lose touch of all of those absolute hands-on things. So what I then needed to do as the business owner, in order to ensure that the business could grow and maintain quality, was to ensure that we had a whole lot of additional systems, processes, and controls in place. So what that did is it sort of informed me that I needed to, from a strategic perspective, get some additional brain power into it. Also, it's pretty easy when you're the sole owner and director to be able to make all sorts of decisions that you think are the right ones, but in hindsight could have been done better if someone had been there providing some critical input. So what tends to happen is businesses, as they grow, and particularly as they want to expand into other particular areas within financial advice, it's a trigger to be putting in place additional directors. But as Cardi and Steve have said, you need diversity of thought around it. So the concept is you want to appoint a board sooner than when you actually need it. It's no use waiting until you're in the doo-doo and then appointing a board. You want to be proactive around this because it does take time. You may want to transition into an advisory board first to see whether you like the concept and whether you like the people that you're thinking of bringing on board, and then ultimately move that through. So I'd be thinking that if you've got a business hypothetically now of half a dozen advisors, then you may want to realistically be thinking about having an independent director. There is no black and white around when you need to or what number of advisors, but it's appropriate to be looking at some form of thing of external input the moment you move beyond just yourself or a couple of others as directors within the business. Constantly test yourself around independence, looking at it and going, the people I'm bringing on, are they conflicted in some shape or form? Have I actually got a degree of independence around what is actually happening with these? If they're external advisors and not actually directors, then am I actually making them inadvertently deemed directors where they would be, in a court of law, be challenged for being a director when actually they're not actually appointed as a director. Some people think, well, the easy way to do all of this is just to take one of my key staff that's been with me for a long time and have him or her become a fellow director. But that creates additional liability for that person. And if they're not going to be rewarded for it in some shape or form, then why on earth would they sort of do that? Also, by appointing someone within your business like a fellow advisor, it's odds on they are going to be just like you and think just like you. So all you've done is tick the box and said, hey, it's more than just me. But the reality is it's just a clone of you and you haven't got that diversification of thought process. And the last one there is around evaluation. Larger boards will formally evaluate themselves each year to make sure that they are doing the best job possible for the stakeholders. And what you need to be doing, even as a sole practitioner and sole director, is to go, have I got a good oversight and governance structure? Is there something I can do better, even if it's going to cost me a few dollars every year, so that people are challenging the way I drive my business and challenging the quality of the service that I'm providing to my clients and challenging my concept around what is good conduct, because it's challenging you over all aspects of your business that are really important. Learning stuff, CPD, doing courses, that's all well and good. But it's someone taking all of that external stuff and then pointing the finger or asking you the question, how are you applying that in your business? And how do you know that that's good? And what can you do, director, to make it better as far as client outcomes and suitability of advice? Steve, anything from you?
Yes, I just wanted to echo your statement about bringing on staff as fellow directors, and you do want some diversity in that space, and a lot of advisors that work together tend to be relatively similar. And another potential issue with that is you want to make sure you bring on people with credentials that, as David and Cardi have emphasized, are going to actually push you and feel comfortable. So you have to have not necessarily a skill set where you're looking for somebody that just agrees with you all the time, but you're looking for somebody who can provide a little bit of conflict and a little bit of asking you the tough questions and pushing you forward. if we flip over to the next slide, we just wanted to outline some of the tools you have available or some of the information out there that you can use as a resource with the FMA. So the FMA has put out a guidance note on the essentials of being a director. That's something we'd encourage all directors to, all potential directors to look at and move forward to learn a little bit more. We've outlined a couple of times in this session, but is seeking additional information, seeking more resources, seeking increased education in this space, I think the three of us would agree is going to be relatively mandatory as we move forward. And if we want to jump over to the summary slide. Yes, I guess I will start since I'm up. But in terms of the summary, FAP directors oversee and are responsible for all of those under the license. Make sure you're very comfortable with those people under your license and in your business and their skill sets, and make sure they're a cultural fit in your business. Some business are having to make those decisions. Know your obligations. We've gone through a number of those, but don't be afraid to learn more about what those obligations are. And we would say definitely learn more about what those obligations are. Keep it simple and sort the issue now. That's something we probably really haven't touched on enough, is that you should be having these meetings now. You should be thinking about what structure you're going to have in place. And we would really encourage groups to start moving forward to put those in place and get those active now. I did want to mention one other thing. Do your due diligence on being a FAP director. It's going to be something that's relatively new for a lot of advisors. And it's actually okay to say that you don't want to take that responsibility, that you want to find a home somewhere else. And that should be an active decision a lot of advisors, a lot of primarily advisors who don't have a lot of experience need to do their due diligence and make that decision actively, not just passively. The obligations, they are very different skill set from being an advisor. And it's okay if you don't want to and you want to just be an advisor. What about you, Cardi?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I guess I just want to reiterate one thing, and that governance very much sets the tone of your business. And so you want to be making decisions that uphold the company values and help you achieve the vision for your business. And one of the first ways of doing that is really making sure everyone that oversees your business is of good character. And I think this goes in nicely with your comment about doing appropriate due diligence. But really, when you're thinking about good character, you're talking about things like doing the right thing, being honest about what you're doing, taking responsibility for your actions and decisions. And these are the people that are going to set the leadership, you know, for the advisors and everyone operating under your license. But I think that slide, we're just going to slip back. If we could just go back to the previous slide for a minute, Naomi, and just talk about some of these tools that the FMA have, which are very good and very helpful. And what you'll find going through these is you'll find, particularly in the conduct guide, some really good questions at the back. And really all you've got to do is ask yourself and your internal board or advisory board some of the questions that sit in there. And you know, one of our recent webinars, we had it on the advice process, and somebody came in with a really good comment afterwards, is about how do people understand the advice. Well, that's exactly what your oversight and your governance people should be asking going forward. Good questions such as, how did you determine the advice was suitable? How do you know your client understands the advice? How do you know that you're meeting your licensee obligations? So these are the type of questions that you'll find in the back of the conduct guide, but also the type of questions that you'll expect your oversight body to be asking going forward. You'll see there's a common theme here. How do you know? And they'll be expecting that you'll be drilling down and getting evidence out of the business, first-hand observations, looking at information coming through the business, drilling down onto registers and other activities, talking to people. But there needs to be a whole good range of how does this information go through to your oversight body so that they know that you're meeting your obligations as a new licensee. David, do you have any other words of wisdom to add to that?
Yeah, so just in summary, if you're going to evolve from just yourself as a sole director and you're going to appoint perhaps one other, then I can't stress enough, it does take time. Having been through the process, you may find that you initially get it wrong and you need to backtrack. So give yourself plenty of time to select the right person. But above all, make sure that person has got a skill set and particularly an experience base that you don't have. And that's very important in our business. We have had 2 independent directors, both with strong financial services background, but both at a corporate level and at a global level in one particular case, which is an experience that I don't have. And so they can look at issues within our business and they can look at the market in which we operate and provide insights that I necessarily wouldn't have. And that's incredibly valuable from my perspective as the shareholder and the owner. Also, if you're going to bring on directors, you've got to be prepared to pay for them. If you bring on someone and they are cheap or they cost you nothing or they're doing it as a favor, then probably you're not going to get the real value out of them. And also they're probably unwittingly taking on a whole lot of potential liability that they're not aware of. And as a result, something can backfire. So if you're going to bring on proper directors, they are going to be liable. Their backsides are on the line. And if things go wrong, the FMA will be asking for both you as the owner shareholder and also for any other directors that you have to front up. And the liabilities start from there. So it's really important you get people who can add value to your business and that you respect. And although you may be the owner of the business and you can hold all of the cards, the moment you appoint someone as a director, you've got to listen to them, because it's really important that you get a consensus opinion and decision making as you move forward. So the 2 independents that I've got, I listen to them. My CEO, he listens to them, and they critique the things that we do within the business, and that's fine and dandy because that's what we pay them to do. But having independent directors is a massive benefit to your business once your business gets to a size where you probably need them. So they're my sort of key takeouts from my personal experience. So perhaps back over to you, Mark.
I think that was an amazing presentation with some incredible content, and I hope that those of you watching this webinar kind of understand how much value was just squeezed into that last 45 or 50 minutes. For me, it's really important to think of governance as a journey that your governance structure grows with your business. As many people in the industry know, I run a martial arts school outside of my day job. Governance for me is a little notebook. You can't quite see because of my virtual background. Just a paper notebook. Every 3 months, I sit down with an agenda and I wrote notes on all the things on my agenda, whether it's around operations, my finances, the risks going on in the business, the laws that I have to comply with, and making sure that I'm compliant with the governance activity, the compliance activities going on in the business. And then, of course, the things that we love to think about, the strategy and the marketing and those sorts of things. And every 3 months, I just write some notes. I work with a business mentor. My business mentor and I discuss some of those things, but I'm taking full responsibility. And the next step in that journey, moving to an advisory board where someone doesn't have necessarily the liability that they're taking on, but you're taking on independent advice as your business grows. And it really clearly came out in the seminar. It's about choosing the right people, with not people that aren't just going to agree with you, people that have different skill sets, and getting a broad range of skills to help you grow your business. And then finally moving to that level of maturity of taking on formal directors who will take on liability and have a very important role to play in your business, and should have just as much say and be listened to just as much as you're thinking about what you're doing yourself. So that journey is really important. For a lot of small businesses, this concept of governance is quite an unusual one, quite an alien one in many cases. Although you'll be thinking at times about that growth element of your business. Quite often, when you're in the shower having a cup of tea, you might be thinking about some of these things. And governance is about formalizing that thinking. and then growing it as your business grows. A huge thank you to our panelists for the amazing content that came out today. I've got quite a few notes actually from what I've learned from this webinar, and I hope you do too. Do keep records of your training, of course. Going forward, CPD is going to be a requirement for everybody, even if you're not an AFA now. And all of these sorts of webinars and things are a very important part of the training that you're doing to upskill yourself. So thank you very much again to our experts. It's just a tremendous value to have these people involved. The next webinar that we're running is on risk management, which is another key area about the oversight of your business. It's what are the key things that could happen. We had a very big wake-up call in 2020 and continue to have a wake-up call around the importance of risk management when COVID-19 hit and we were all locked in our houses for 6 weeks for round 1 and for those of us in Auckland for round 2 as well. That webinar will be on the 18th of September, and coming up over the next few sessions, we've got other great topics lined up for you, including things like privacy and the new obligations under the Revised Privacy Act. We're going to talk about conflicts of interest and gifts and incentives, which are a very important topic for those of us in financial advice, as I'm sure you'll be aware from all of the press that's been happening from the FMA and the ministry and things in these areas. And we're also going to have a session on disclosure and the new disclosure requirements to help you prepare for your disclosure for the new regime on the 15th of March. So I hope to see you back for the next webinar on the 18th of September. Book it in your diary, share it with other colleagues, try and get more people along to these webinars, because the more people we help, the stronger the industry is going to be going forward. Thank you very much to everyone for coming along. I'll look forward to seeing you all in 2 weeks.